Sol Tarvitz, captain of the Emperor's Children Legion, sensed something was off. Horus, war master of the Imperium, beloved by all and one of the Emperor's 20 sons, had called 3 of his brothers to the Istvaan system, on the outskirts of the galaxy for a battle against the uprising of a world called Istvaan III. Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children and Tarvitz's gene father, was one of them. Tarvitz made his way through the innards of the strike cruiser the Andronius. He knew that nearly 100,000 Space Marines of all 4 legions combined were on the surface right now, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had plenty reason to be unsure, having noticed some strange developments over the last few months. So he had asked ancient Rylanor, one of the Legion's most honored dreadnoughts, to take his place in the assault force on Istvaan III, so he could go and investigate. He had made his way down into the lower reaches of the ship, to the gunnery decks, and discovered that the guns were being made ready for what seemed like a bombardment of the surface forces. Anger rose up in him, with the Astartes on the surface. Who exactly were they planning to attack? His anger turned into complete shock when he found that the warheads loaded into the guns were virus bombs, loaded with the Life-Eater virus. These warheads are some of the most efficient ways of annihilating all life on a planet ever created by mankind. And the only one who could have authorized their use was the War Master, Horus Lupercal himself. Tarvitz understood what this meant. Horus had turned away from the Emperor. Fulgrim, Mortarion, and Angron had turned with him. They were here to rid themselves of the elements of their legions that they knew would never turn with them. Those Astartes whose loyalty ran deeper for the Emperor than it did for their gene sire. Tarvitz rushed to the embarkation deck, stole a Thunderhawk and sped through the void, down to the planet's surface, chased by fighters and with flames licking his Thunderhawk as he breached the atmosphere. He pushed the gunship as hard as he dared, hoping against hope that he'd be in time to warn those on the surface of what was about to happen. The Emperor's children and world leaders were deployed in the heart of the city, on the Precentor's palace. The Death Guard were to take the complex network of bunkers and trenches to the west, and the Sons of Horus dropped in on the Cyanhold in the east. Names like Loken, Torkadon, and Rylanor were down on the surface of the world, each fighting a war that had turned into an illusion overnight. Tarvitz touched down near the Emperor's children and had them vox the other legions. He himself went to warn the world leaders. As Tarvitz met up with the world leaders and the group fled to the bunkers, Tarvitz glanced up at the sky and saw the first streaks of fire falling towards the city. It had started. The first bombs detonated high over the Coral City, spreading their deadly payload far and wide into the atmosphere. The virus spread over the planet, covering the world in a blanket of death. Many Astartes had made it to cover in the nick of time. Many more had not. The virus attacked the flesh. Warriors clad in power armor fell to their knees as the virus ate its way through the weak seals in their armor. Astartes screamed as their flesh sloughed off of their bones, their bodies dissolving until there was nothing left but a soup of rancid meat contained in broken armor. And Istvaan III was a hive world. The virus took mere minutes to spread over the world. Afterwards, when it had no more flesh to feast on, it died off, leaving behind an atmosphere's worth of noxious flammable gases. A single land strike came down from orbit, setting the planet ablaze, covering the entire world in what was known as a firestorm. The virus bombs were designed to eliminate all life on a planet, without breaking the planet itself. After the firestorm, the commander who gave the order could walk across their newly conquered world, mere hours after the bombs had landed. Or at least, that was the idea. As the fire died down, the heavy-duty doors to some of the bunkers opened, and out came the Death Guard and the world leaders. And to the east, the Emperor's children and Sons of Horus emerged from the deepest parts of the catacombs, with their eyes turned to the sky. Captains Tarvitz and Erlen of the World Eaters emerged from the bunker they were hiding in, immediately met by the sight of traitor World Eaters' Thunderhawks soaring down from the sky, their heavy bolters roaring as they fired upon them. The lead Thunderhawk dropped through the ruins with its assault ram down. Angron, Genesire of the World Eaters, leapt out of the opening and crashed into the tiles. The World Eaters had suffered the worst of the bombardment, far from cover as they were, and many of those that did survive the virus bombs now fell to Angron's chain axe. Captains Loken and Torgadon and the former Sons of Horus under their command had also survived the virus bombs and emerged from the Scion Hold. They too had enemy craft incoming. Loken and Torgadon, calculating and calm, decided that the best course of action was to link up with what was left of the other legions in the heart of the city. And they would do so. By the time Horus and the remaining traitors had landed on the planet's surface, Loken and Torgadon had successfully linked up with Tarvitz and the rest of the Emperor's children, as well as the remaining World Eaters. 100,000 Loyalist Astartes touched down on Istvaan III. Let's say 2/3 of that number survived the virus bombs and firestorms as a generous estimate. They were equipped with their usual weaponry, meaning bolters, blades, and grenades. Perhaps a handful of dreadnoughts were among them. No land raiders or tanks, no titans, and their ammunition and supplies would run out quickly. And they were up against 4 Primarchs, 100,000 Astartes, 3 Titan Legio, and an entire accompanying fleet in orbit, equipped with Thunderhawks, dreadnoughts, tanks, and a nearly endless stream of supplies. All of this makes it all the more impressive that they managed to hold out for more than 2 months. The city lies flat and broken from weeks of continued fighting. Tarvitz, Loken, and Torgadon may have managed to hold out until now, but things were looking worse than ever, and it was about to get much worse. Horus was beginning to get impatient, and was planning to finish them off with an orbital bombardment. Presumably, he felt it was wasting too much time on these last remaining Astartes. The more time the Emperor had to prepare for the upcoming heresy, the harder it will be for Horus to win. He needed to move on to phase 2 of his plan, shattering the retaliation force the Emperor would undoubtedly send. Something Horus was planning on doing on Istvaan V, a battle that would later be known as the Dropside Massacre. Let me know if you want me to cover this battle as well someday. On the surface of Istvaan III, however, jealousy had corrupted one of the Emperor's children captains among the Loyalist forces. This captain contacted the traitor forces and struck a bargain. He would be allowed to rejoin the Legion, and in turn he would guide the traitor forces through a network of tunnels into the Loyalist stronghold. None of the Loyalists were prepared for the traitors' attack from this unexpected direction. One by one they all fell under the weight of bolter and blade. Loken and Torgadon were lured out from the palace and confronted by Abaddon and Aximan, the other half of what used to be the Mournival, Horus's personal advisors. After a tough fight between the two pairs, they all noticed that the orbital bombardment had begun. At long last, Horus had had enough, and rained death down upon the Coral City, for the second time. Now, under time pressure, Aximan managed to best Torgadon and decapitated him. Loken got buried underneath a pile of rubble and was presumed dead, along with all of the other Loyalist Astartes on the surface of Istvaan III. And just like that, the Istvaan Atrocity was over. After the dust had settled, there was little left on Istvaan III, except empty suits of power armor lying still in the sands. 100,000 loyal Marines died here, bolter and blade firmly in hand against a storm of fire and betrayal. The prelude to the Horus Heresy, the battle for Istvaan III, was over, and the Horus Heresy was about to begin. Thank you for joining me in remembering those Astartes who never turned from the Imperium. Their heroic deeds and last stands on the surface of Istvaan III will forever live in our hearts. And with that, I've said all I needed to, and I'll leave you with your thoughts.